One of the complexities about product management is that you don't have as clear of an artifact or a deliverable as some other functions do. So a product designer may have a specific user research output or a set of screens and visuals and flow within a product. An engineer will have code. A salesperson will have a signed deal that they closed. As a product manager, you have some outputs, such as a product roadmap. But at the end of the day, a lot of what you're responsible for is the process and the outcome. And sometimes it's hard to see all of the different factors that go into that and articulate what the job looks like. I like to start describing product management with this picture, which is Jiro Ono. Jiro is famously a restaurateur behind Sukiyabashi Jiro, a Japanese sushi restaurant in a subway in Tokyo. And I put this up here because when I worked at LinkedIn in 2012, Jeff Weiner wanted the entire product team to watch this documentary called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And Jiro, who at the time was in his 80s and had been doing this for decades, had this approach where sushi seems very simple. It's rice and it's fish. But behind the scenes, he worked every single day to identify the ideal sequence of all of the different components, the ideal recipe in terms of the type of fish and how to trim it and how to prepare it, right down to the exact temperature of the rice and the fish, which varied by dish and by type of fish, in order to serve it to people in the best possible way so people would go away having this wonderful experience and not understand all of the complexity and detail behind it, but simply love the sushi that they had and say, this is some of the best sushi that I've ever eaten. And Jeff Weiner loved the craftsperson approach, which was constantly working to get better. And a big part of your job as a product manager is to be relentlessly curious and always working to improve so that you can take the complexity behind the scenes, work on it, fine-tune it, perfect it, and then hide that complexity from your customer so it comes across as very simple and makes their life better in some way. Now, when you look at articulating the different components of a product management job, there are a few analogies out there. Some people say you are the CEO of your product. I don't like that analogy because you don't have the authority of a CEO. You can't hire and fire people on the sprint team necessarily. Some people will say if you like sports that you're the quarterback. I think that's a little bit closer because you're leading without authority and you're calling shots and you're making things happen. The analogy that I like the best, Ken Norton uses, which is being a conductor. At the end of the day, you are not the one that makes the magic happen. You aren't playing the saxophone or the clarinet or the piano or the drums. However, you are responsible for pulling all of those pieces together and tuning it so the outcome is this beautiful symphony. It may look silly on stage making these hand movements, and people may think that you could disappear and it would all be the same, but it's not. At the end of the day, that complexity, again, behind the scenes, pulls this together so that your customer can experience something wonderful. And when you break it down into the individual components, there are a lot of different ways that you can describe a PM job. The one that I like to use, which I think is very simple and effective, comes from Todd Jackson. He was one of my managers when I worked at Twitter, and he is now an investor and a partner at First Round Capital. And he describes a PM's responsibilities as three things. Number one, articulate what a winning product looks like. Number two, rally the team to build it. And number three, iterate until you get it right. I think this sums up what a product manager does. Now let's go into each of these individually to understand those components and the skills and capabilities that will make you successful there. Articulate what a winning product looks like. This is about being heads up and outside of your office, understanding the competitive dynamics of your industry, the specific competitors and what they're good at and what they're not, the vendors, the customers, and very particularly obsessing about your customers. When I talked to a lead product manager at Instagram, he said that one of the most defining moments of his career was not all of the internal work, but a trip to Japan, where he went to Japan and got deep empathy of how folks in that country and many other countries interacted with social media, and specifically with Instagram. And he was able to come back to the States and then sit down and have ideas about products and solutions that would improve their lives. That was so much more powerful than if he had been staying in Menlo Park. When I worked at Flatiron Health, for example, We built software for oncology practices to do better cancer research. And the founders used to talk about text message relationships with clients. We had clients that were leading MDs and cancer researchers and CEOs, and they had relationships that were so tight that they would text message back and forth. And this was critical because you had to really understand your customer and what drives them. When a new product manager joined my team as VP of product, I would recommend that they go visit 5 practices in the first 6 months and go and just shadow doctors and ask questions and understand what it takes to run a cancer practice. And that enables you to come back and then tackle the next part of this, which is synthesis. Pulling it all together and saying, this is the clear vision. In 3 years, this is where we want to be. A vision is a mutually understood picture of the future that everybody can get behind. And then a strategy. Very specifically how you plan to differentiate and win against the competition over the next 1 to 2 years. And then particular plans. We're serving these customer personas with these products, and this is why we're choosing this direction and this execution. You pull all that story together and articulate what a winning product looks like. That's the first big chunk of being a product manager. Rally the team to build it. A lot of people think when they first get into product management that your job is to make the product strategy decisions and set the roadmap. And while that's true, it turns out it's probably the first 10% of the job. The next 90% of the job is running a persistent internal marketing campaign to get everybody jazzed about your direction so that the company will support it, which is the only way that your plans will ever be successful. The engineering team has to rally around it. The marketing team has to rally around it. Maybe the sales team, the operations team. Everybody has to come together in order to make this a success. So this is about leadership. It's about communication. It's about being succinct. It's about checking your ego at the door and having the humility to develop your own executive presence over time, especially as you have increasing levels of responsibility or scope within an organization. And then very specifically on the ground level, working with engineers and having the humility to have empathy for their jobs and understanding and respecting the work that they do and leading the sprint team so that people really believe that you have the user's best interests in mind and the team's best interests in mind. And when you make a judgment call, people will get behind it and say, yeah, absolutely, let's go. And that is the big difference between people that are getting into product management and people that are very successful in product management, is rallying the team to build it. When I was at Flatiron Health, Zach Weinberg, one of the founders, told me when I took on the VP of product role that my job was to communicate and communicate and communicate and do it repeatedly until I felt like it was enough, and then probably double that. And that was about right. And looking back, it was absolutely accurate. You have to, on one side, be able to move very quickly, take a tremendous amount of information and synthesize it and think fast on your feet. And on the other side, you have to tolerate repetition. If you think about Apple, they don't advertise their products once and expect you to buy an iPhone. They put it in the subway. They put it on TV. They put it on Instagram. They put it in your email. They put it in the mall. They put it everywhere. And you see it again and again and again and again. And then you get this internal feeling about it. Marketing is about multiple impressions. Same thing with a roadmap. If you tell something once to somebody, it's not their fault if they don't remember it and understand it. When I worked at LinkedIn, the head of sales used to talk about pull through. If you sent an email to the organization, it wasn't just you told them what's happening. Was there pull through? Did they open the email? Did they read the email? Did they process the email? Did they understand the email? And then did they remember it? And then did they act on it? To go from end to end, you can't send one email and say, hey, here's our product strategy, and then be upset if somebody doesn't understand it or remember it. You have to consistently, in multiple different audiences and formats, do it in written format, on Slack in small format, in Google Slides in long format, in large group settings, in small group settings, one-to-one, to executives, to engineers, to data scientists, to the finance team. And this is repeated and repeated. And so your communication skills, your storytelling skills, and your leadership skills, this is where this really starts to come out. And when we get into the interview process, you'll see why a lot of this is really important, because ultimately you're the glue in the organization that pulls everything together, rallies the team, and makes the product successful. Iterate until you get it right. This is about getting down and dirty with the details. It's about data and having an analytical mindset, and day to day, week to week, really pushing on an individual feature level or ticket or debugging. It's about setting milestones and having really strong product management and project management skills to get you to an outcome on time, to make a big presentation at a conference. It's about understanding how to set objectives and key results and measure metrics over time to see how you're doing versus plan. And then come back at the end of the quarter and say, hey, we're on a cadence. These are the goals we set. This is how we did. This is what worked well. This is what didn't work well. And here's what's next as a result. It's about your personal impact. It's about taking out the trash if you have to. Every little thing, if it's about design, if it's about data, filling in the missing pieces and essentially doing whatever it takes, back to Jiro Dreams of Sushi, whatever it takes, delivering that experience to the customer. The product manager has core responsibilities, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for the outcome and the success of the product and the success of the customer. So you are the glue, you pull it all together, and you iterate and you iterate, and you take your vision and strategy that you set before, and then you get deep in the details with engineers, you build the product, and you get it out there.